Hey, what's going on? My name is Andy Monroe, the co-founder of Bullish Events, and welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'm actually going to be walking you through the exact budget sheet that we used when we spent over $1 million on a live event. Yep, you heard that right. We spent over $1 million on a live event. This took place back in 2023, and I believe it was in Miami, Florida. Yeah, this one was in Miami. And it might actually be really close, but I think this is the most money that we have ever spent on a single event. With this client, I'm not going to mention their name just for the sake of privacy, but we spent, the first event was around $750,000. The second event, which was this one in 2023, was around $1.6 million. And then I think the third one was a little bit closer to $1 million. I'll have to double check that, but I think this one was the most. If not, it was the second most. But the reason I want to show you guys this sheet is just to kind of break down what went into $1 million live event. And at the end of it, I'm going to kind of give my thoughts on if I think this was worth it, if I would ever recommend spending this much on a live event, or if I would just recommend going the lean route. Now, before I dive in, a little bit of context on Bullish Events. At Bullish Events, we help high-ticket coaching and consulting businesses scale to 7 and 8 figures a year with live events. We've been able to generate over $10 million in revenue from live events, and we've had over 6,400 attendees come through our in-person live experiences. All right, with all that being said, let's jump right into it. So this is the sheet that I personally used when I was organizing and designing this event. You can see down here, the allocated budget was actually $1.2 million. We ended up spending around 1.06, so save some money. We used to have a padding in there too, just in case, just for accuracy's sake. You know, when you're spending this much money on events, it's realistic to go over or under by, you know, around $125,000, $130,000. So this padding was in there. So the overall budget that we had was around $1.3 million, accounting for this padding that the finance team gave us. So I'm just gonna go down item by item and show you what it looked like and kind of the reasoning behind each one of these line items. So the first one is ad spend. For these events that we did, ads were a pretty large part of the marketing efforts. We were trying to get a lot of cold audiences into the room because the purpose of this event was to enroll people into a high ticket coaching program. So we wanted people in the room that weren't already a part of the program, but also something to point out. Yes, we wanted to get cold people in the room, but ads are also a great way to get warm people in the room. So we would do cold campaigns, which was great, but one of the most successful campaigns that we would run, or I should say series of campaigns, was running campaigns towards our warm audience. So people that were visiting our website, people that had bought lower ticket products but weren't in the high ticket program that we were trying to sell, people that had interacted with our ads before, people that had watched some of our videos. Honestly, if I were to go back to this event, I would want to just focus on running ads towards warm audiences because it's just easier and it just works a lot better. I mean, I'm sure if you ran ads before, you know how difficult it is to run ads, especially to an event in regard to a cold audience. However, if you're running ads towards a warm audience or people that are just familiar with yourself and your brand, it really reduces the amount of time and touch points you have to spend and have with somebody to build that know, like, and trust factor, because actually selling a ticket to an event is pretty hard and it takes a lot of time for somebody to build that trust to actually buy a ticket to your event, especially if they're cold. So first recommendation I would have would be to focus on your warm audience when selling tickets to your event. So we had $125,000 allocated for the ad spend. Looks like we spent around $100,000. Now moving on to audio visual. For this event series, we did 3 of these events and we really like to make the audio visual a cool experience. This event took place in the financial industry, so there's a lot of financial professionals in the room, but we didn't want to do like a typical finance event. We wanted it to be fun. We kind of wanted it to feel like a financial conference, but also a music festival, like if those two like combined. So we had a ton of music, a ton of cool lights, like massive LED walls, all these lasers, and like the music was going. It was awesome, but it did end up costing us around $165,000. So we spent a lot of money there. I think that was worth it, honestly. If I were to pick one thing in this whole list I thought was worth it, I think it was the audio visual because it was super cool. And the client actually has assets they can use for life, with them speaking on stage in front of this really cool audio visual display. So the next item down here was BC event. So this was the event for their high ticket coaching program. So the way this event worked is it was a 3-day conference. It was meant to enroll people into their high ticket program, and then at the end of the event they would have a separate event just for members of that high ticket program. So people that were in the program before the event started, and also people that joined the program at the event. And this is essentially a second event that we would organize. We had 150 grand allocated. We ended up spending around $76,000 for this event, but there's clients where we don't even spend 76 grand on one event. That's a pretty steep budget for one event. And this was just like a sub event within this, big, like $1.06 million event. So this kind of shows how much money we spent on this freaking event. It was crazy. But if you are hosting events for your coaching consulting business, you're trying to enroll people into your different high ticket programs, I would definitely recommend having some sort of incentive here, some sort of a gathering party, something for the members of your program to gather. One, because it makes the people that are attending your event that are already inside of your program, it makes them feel special. And then on the other hand, it's almost like a fast action bonus. Like if somebody joins the program at the event, then they can go and attend this exclusive mastermind networking event after the event. And it kind of, it satisfies that FOMO urge that people have. So regardless if you're going to spend $1 million or $10,000, I would definitely recommend having some sort of event for people that join the program at your event. And you can, of course, invite people that are already inside the program that didn't buy at the event. So that is that was this budget item. Then moving on to food and beverage, we spent 75 grand on food and beverage, and this was just for VIP people. Or I believe at this event, this was just for the members of the program, the high ticket program that we were selling at the event. So this was one meal. Plus, of course, we had coffee and some snacks, but I'd say around $50,000 of this budget went to just one meal. And that's just that's insane. That one of the most expensive aspects of hosting live events by far is food and beverage. So if you can get around that, I would definitely recommend it. We've definitely learned some ways to get around this now. This was back in 2023, but for the sake of this event, we kind of knew we were going to have to spend that much money. So 75 grand went to one lunch plus some coffee and snacks, which was awesome. We spent around $5,000 on a merch booth. Pretty standard stuff. We just sold some t-shirts, some hats, some bags, all that good stuff. We spent $32,000 on branding. So this was standing banners. This was big banners up in the hallway. Some of the branding is out of the ballroom, some signs to show people where to go, pretty standard stuff. And the reason it was so expensive is just because we had to just order a lot. There's over, at this event, there was almost 2,000 attendees walking around in this big resort. So we had to show them where to go. And this client in particular really cared about the experience and the way it felt, which I enjoy. It's kind of, as someone who designs events for a living, it gives us a lot of creative freedom. So instead of just having very small, dinky standing banners, we had some of those, but we had a lot of large signs that were great for photo opportunities. So that is why we spent $32,000 on branding. They had some coaches that they flew out, which was a $5,000 budget item. Insurance, we spent $600 on insurance. So if you're going to be doing live events, I would definitely recommend having some sort of insurance in place. This just protects you just in case something goes wrong at the event. If there's a fire that happens in the ballroom and everyone starts to run out and someone falls down and they, sprain their ankle or break their leg because they got trampled. I know that's worst case scenario, but if you're going to be hosting live events, you kind of have to be thinking in the worst case scenario. Insurance protects you from that, as well as having a waiver in place. So if you're going to be hosting live events, I would recommend having insurance, and I would recommend having a waiver in place that just protects you as the host. So moving on to miscellaneous, this is a pretty steep miscellaneous budget. Whenever I host an event, I like to have a miscellaneous item, just because stuff comes up. You're on site at the event and you need to go buy some note cards, you need to go buy some food, you need to go buy some gas for your car, whatever it is. Stuff just pops up. For a big event, $18,000 was a bit aggressive, but we did spend $7,000 of miscellaneous. So if you're going to be creating budgets for your own live events, I would definitely recommend having a miscellaneous budget item in there. Now, moving on to printing and literature. So these were order forms, itineraries. I think we had like a charity sponsor there that also had some order forms. So you can see that stuff just adds up. And this was for, 2,000 attendees. So even if the order forms themselves are pretty cheap, it still adds up. Okay, moving on to registration. So this is when people are checking in. And most of this expense went to badges, badge printers, and all of just like the resources we use when we're checking people in at events. And yeah, it's usually not that expensive, but when you're dealing with 2,000 attendees, that's where you spend $20,000 on registration. Security. So for these bigger events, we actually do have a security team that comes out and just makes sure that everything is safe, and that the attendees feel safe, that the host feels safe, the staff feels safe. And there was actually an incident. It wasn't at this event, but the year after, there was a security, you could say, breach. It wasn't a breach. There was an incident where the security had to get involved, and me as the designer, I was very, very happy that security was there, because they were trained to handle the situation that was happening. And if it was just me, I would have been fine, but it was just like, it was very foreign situation to me, and I was just very happy that there was a trained security professional on site to kind of de-escalate the situation. So you definitely probably don't need to worry about having a security team unless your event gets over maybe if you're getting into like the 500 to 1,000 attendee range, but we didn't have a security team on site until we had over 1,000 attendees. So unless you're having over 1,000 attendees at your event, I wouldn't recommend having security. All right, now moving on to speaker and MC fees. So as you can see, we spent a lot of money on speakers for this event. And at this event, we actually had Ed Milet come and speak, who is if you guys aren't familiar, he's one of the most famous motivational speakers in the entrepreneur space. And it was a phenomenal speech. And then we had a series of other smaller speakers, and then we had an MC as well. And MCs are actually really important for events, especially events where you are trying to enroll people into your high ticket offers. If you're not trained as an MC, and kind of planting seeds and framing and kind of moving people along the buying process at your event, I would highly recommend hiring an MC. We have a few MCs in our network that we use, so if you ever need recommendations, please just reach out. But I would highly recommend having an MC, because it really helps with the whole sales process at your event. And if you're not trained to be a sales MC, then I would highly recommend hiring one out. It just takes so much of a burden off your shoulders. So speakers, MC was in this fee. We ended up spending almost $250,000 on speakers, which is insane. And as you can see down here, there's like speaker food, speaker and MC lodging, speaker and MC travel. So altogether, let's see how much we spent total on speakers. About right around $250,000 on speakers alone, which is crazy. Staff food, around $5,000 was allocated. We spent like $2,100. So this is just feeding the staff at the event. Staff lodging, this was lodging for staff. And then staff travel. I think actually lodging was definitely not $1,600. I think we just ended up putting everything here in staff travel. So this is where we spent a lot of money at these events. We would bring a lot of staff out to actually help with the event, and we ended up spending $23,000 on flights and hotels. So if you're going to be hosting bigger events, you got to realize that it can't just be you. Like, it's not just going to be you hosting the event. If you have an internal team that works with you, that's the best. This client had a massive internal team, and the internal team was amazing. They were very friendly, very sociable people. So we would just fly them out to help with the event. But if it's just you, if you're like a solopreneur, if you have a smaller team, you're probably going to have to outsource some of the labor, and it'll still come with, some fees, travel, flights, hotels, all that good stuff. So just be prepared for that. And then moving on down here to swag. So you can see that we had two different swag categories. This was for the high ticket program members, so people that were already inside of the high ticket program that we're going to be selling at the event, and then swag for general admission. So altogether we spent around $82,000 on swag, which the swag wasn't that expensive. We weren't getting Viore or Lululemon for these people, but at the end of the day, if you have over around 2,000 attendees, it doesn't really matter how cheap the merch or the swag is going to be. You're going to spend a lot of money. So we spent quite a bit on swag and merchandise. And then the venue actually that we hosted the event at, we spent $75,000 on. So you can see we spent the way that the venues usually work is we had a rental fee of $75,000. Then we had a food and beverage minimum of, where was the food and beverage? Right here. So it was 75 and 75. So we spent $150,000 total on a venue, counting the food and the venue rental fee, which is actually, for a 2,000 attendee event, one of the cheapest quotes that we've seen. I was shopping around different cities like Nashville and Vegas. I think we looked at Orlando for this one. it's expensive. If you're hosting multi-thousand attendee events in conferences, it gets pretty expensive. So that's why we ended up spending 150 grand on the venue and the food and beverage, and then videography and photography. So we spent 20 grand to fly a team out and shoot the event, and this is actually incredibly important. I know I said that the audio visual is the one that I don't regret, but the one that's the most functional is the videography and photography because of how many marketing assets are generated from live events. The client that we worked with on this event is going to be able to make money from these assets until they go out of business, for 5, 10, 15 years in the future. The assets just look so good. And we got testimonials, we got B-roll, we got pictures, we got interviews with all the speakers, we got interviews with the attendees. It was insane. So if you're going to be hosting events, the one thing you don't want to cheap out on is photography and videography. You want to capture those moments where you're gathering people in the room because they just create amazing marketing assets. And one thing we actually did here too is we repurpose the event content. So we turn it into different products. We do encore events. We capture all the sessions so that we can continue to make money out with them on the back end as well. So if you're going to be hosting live events for your business, make sure you are getting pictures. Make sure you're recording the sessions so that you can repurpose that content. Make sure you're grabbing testimonials and make sure you're grabbing B-roll because you're not going to want to miss out on those marketing assets. Now down here you can see event planner. So even though we were the ones that were designing the event, we actually hired an outside consultant to help us with this event because this was like my second or third event that I had ever designed. So I was still pretty new in the game, and we hired somebody that had been in the game for 10 or 15 years, and they just acted as like an advisor for us, which I would highly recommend. So we actually do this now. So whether you work with us or you work with somebody else, if it's like your first time in the events game or you're still new and you're still cutting your teeth, I would highly recommend hiring somebody to help you out that's actually done it before, just so you can avoid making some expensive mistakes. All right, we got a few more items here now. So there's staffing. As you can see up here, we actually spent money on the internal staff and we hired some external staff. So we actually spent $47,000 on external staff, and this was people to come and man doors, to usher people, just to make sure that everything was going according to plan. And with an event that's this big, it was necessary for us to have a lot of people on site to come and help out. So that was some external staff. We spent 13 grand on Wi-Fi, and this Wi-Fi was probably just for our internal team. One of the most expensive items at a venue when you're hosting events it's by far Wi-Fi. It's absolutely ridiculous, and it makes me upset because they just turn it on. Like the Wi-Fi is already there, but they charge you outrageous fees for the Wi-Fi. So we spent 13 grand on Wi-Fi, and then we spent $5,900 on a cleaning contractor to come in and clean the venue. That's because this venue did not provide a cleaning contractor, and they were going to charge us an outrageous amount of money if we left any trash behind. So it was actually a smarter financial decision for us to hire a cleaning contractor. So altogether, this was a $1.06 million event, which is actually pretty good. We had $1.2 million allocated, 1.3 with the padding, and we came in like 200 grand under budget, which is pretty sick. And on this column out here, you can see the way that we track these budgets. Like it's, obviously we go over in some, we go under in some. The most important thing is that you just stay within budget of the overall budget. So we made some sacrifices here. Like we wanted to spend a lot of money on registration. So we doubled the budget for registration, which, looks pretty bad if you just isolate that one column. But you can see that we only spent 30% of insurance. We spent 40% of miscellaneous. We spent, 42% of staff food. So you can see if we overspend in one category, we're going to underspend in a different category. Okay, so now that you've seen the way that a $1 million event is broken down and kind of like our thinking and our psychology behind making these decisions, do I think it was worth it? Like we spent the money, we designed this event. Just in case you were wondering too, we spent $1.06 million on this event, and we ended up making around $4.4 million in direct revenue from this event. So still like a 3x ROI on the spend directly. That doesn't count the indirect revenue from people that ended up buying the high ticket program after the event, or people that or the leads we generated from the marketing assets generated, or the revenue that was generated from the encore events, or the money that was made from repurposing the content and selling it as a different offer. There was still a ton of intangible revenue that was made, but we spent $1.06 million and we made $4.4 million, around $4.4 million. That's not the exact number, but I'd say financially, we thought it was worth it. We thought that was a huge success. Of course, we probably could have achieved the same financial results if we would have spent, 250,000 or even $500,000, so we could have increased our profit margins for sure. But it was still a really fun experience to spend this much money on the event, and it was truly an incredible show. People still come and talk to us today about how amazing this event was, and it truly felt like the mixture of a rave or a music festival and a financial conference, which was pretty cool. That was like our vision. We wanted to do something different in the financial industry, and we did. It was very cool. That being said, I would definitely not recommend most people take this route of spending a lot of money to make their event look and feel super luxurious and super extravagant. For this particular client, it made sense, but for most of you that are going to be hosting live events for your coaching or consulting company, I don't anticipate you're going to have just $1 million laying around to go spend on an event. This company at this point was doing, $10 to $15 million a year in revenue. So it made a lot of sense to dump this much money into an event. But if you're just getting started in the live events industry for your coaching or consulting business, or even if you're seasoned and you're making a couple six figures a month and you want to start scaling that revenue up with live events, I would definitely recommend starting small and lean. And just because we spent $1 million on an event doesn't mean that's all we do. We don't just spend a ton of money on events. We've actually done events that had a budget of $1,000 or $5,000 or $10,000. So we've done very, very expensive events, and we've done very cheap events, and they both can achieve amazing results for your business. So if you are just getting started, or if you just want to do these events in a very comfortable way, I would not spend $1 million. I would not spend $500,000 or even $100,000. I would keep your budget as low and lean as possible, of course, without sacrificing the experience. Of course, if you ever have any questions about the events that you are hosting, please feel free to reach out. And that also reminds me of something. So if you are a high ticket coach or consultant that is currently hosting live events for your business, or maybe you're just interested in hosting live events for your business, we actually have a place for you to go. So this is our community Bullish Events. It's on School, and it is completely free. And the way that we are framing this is we're trying to build out a mastermind of high ticket coaches and consultants that are either currently hosting events for their business or are interested in hosting live events for their business. And it's pretty cool. So if you're looking to learn about live events, or you just want to share what's going on and what's working for you or what's not working, and you want to learn from others that are also hosting live events for their businesses, this is the perfect place for you to be. And you can see inside of the community, there's a lot of people that are posting about their events or their questions. Right here's Felix. We did an event with Felix actually a couple of weeks ago in Vienna, and he posted this whole event recap, which was awesome. And then inside of the classroom, we actually have some cool stuff for you. So there's a events masterclass, which we used to sell this for $3,000, and then we just realized that we just want to give it away for free. The only way that Ethan and I make money at Bullish Events is for our done for you services. That's our main offer, where we do everything. We design the event, we help you monetize it, we help you fill it. It's kind of like a full service takeover. And then we do some done with you consulting on a case by case basis if it makes sense for us and for the client. Everything else is completely free though. There's some event tools. We're going to be kind of rolling these out over the next couple of weeks. This is an event ROI projection calculator, so you can come in here and you can play around with some different numbers, and you can kind of see what's possible with your live events and make a best case, worst case, and medium case scenario. We have a food and beverage calculator, and we're going to be dropping some more tools in there soon. But yeah, this is it's completely free, and it's a place for you to go if you are a high ticket coach or consultant that is currently hosting live events for your business, or you are interested in hosting live events for your business at some time. I'll make sure to link that down in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.